Yeah, I understand. Yeah. All right. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 20, where we will begin. So this morning we're gonna make our way through the end of chapter 6 and then go through chapter 7. And we'll be pausing along the way for some key things that is being said here, and then I got some wrap-up questions at the end to see if you paid attention.
No, boys.
So, all right, verse 20, let's start. It says, "My son, keep your father's commands, do not forsake the law of your mother." Some of your translations may say, "Guard your father's commands." I think that's the better teaching. It really is to guard that teaching. And if you go down to verse 24, it uses the same word, to keep you from the evil one. In other words, to guard you from the evil one. So he's saying, guard your father's commands, and it will guard you from this mistake of adultery that we've been talking about. So guard that teaching, keep that teaching. Verse 21 says, "Bind them continually upon your heart, tie them around your neck." You skip over to chapter 7, if you can do that. Chapter 7, verse 2, right? "Keep my commands and live. My law is the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart." Kind of the same kind of introduction here to this lesson in chapter 6 as we have in chapter 7. It really means memorize them, right? Get these teachings, these commands, these patterns, get them locked into your brain, and they will protect you. They will guard you then from the mistakes. Verse 22, "When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. But when you are awake, they will speak to you." Again, get these things in your heart, get them memorized, get them known deep within you, and then they will lead you, right? They will show you the direction that you need to take. They will protect you while you sleep. The idea is they will protect you in general. And then finally, when you're awake, they will speak to you. They will counsel you. They will speak to you in a voice that's louder than audible. If you get them in your heart, you will know these are the right directions. Connected down to verse 23, "For the commandment is a lamp, the law is a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life," right? They are the lamp, they're the light to lead you, to protect you, to counsel you, to overcome the evil, to overcome the darkness, to show you how to get out of it. And notice it ends, it says they are the way of life. So even though the focus here is on adultery, the more general message is, if you keep these commands, if you keep this wisdom in your heart, they are the way of life. They are a way that will keep you in a life that is abundant, in a life that is eternal, in the way that we've talked about it. Well, let's get down to verse 24 is where we start on this issue. "To keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of the seductress." Now we get to chapter 7, there's a whole section there on the flattering tongue, on what the seductress has to say. So I'm not going to say more about it here. But again, he's focusing on the evil woman, the adulterous woman, the unfaithful woman, some of your translations may say. The one who is married, leaves her husband in order to have an affair with you. That is the main focus of what we have here in chapter 6 and 7. Verse 25, do not lust after her beauty in your heart. Do not let her allure you with her eyelids. I can't read. Do not let her allure you with her eyelids. That's a lot of L's. You know, when we get to Proverbs 31, right, and it talks about the gracious woman. You know, when 31:30 it says, "Charm is deceitful, beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord shall be praised." And I think the point here is, don't be lusting after her beauty. It's passing. Don't allure of her eyelids. It's deceitful. The other comment that just be made here is that, you can see here that sin begins in the imagination here, right? It begins in the lure of her beauty, the lure of her eyelids. It's all in the imagination before it actually goes to action. Verse 26. For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Right? The value of a man becomes more than a crust of bread. It reduces man to simply something that is eaten. It points out again the predatory nature of the harlot, that a man is just a crust of bread, just something else to be eaten. The adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Right? It costs him his life, his marriage, his relationships, and eventually death. Verse 27, can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? And obviously he's saying there's a certainty to the penalty. It's not maybe things will fall apart, maybe there'll be a problem. No, there's a certainty to it. Can you take fire in the bosom and your clothes not be burned? Certainly not. Okay. Can a man take fire into his bosom? Or there's definitely a sexual reference there. Take fire into his bosom. His clothes cannot be burned. It's about sexual intimacy. It's about sexual touching. He shall not be innocent. Look at verse. Keep going. Right? Can a man walk on hot coals? His feet not be seared? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. Right? So it's sexual intimacy, the touch, the intimacy of it. All of that is being talked about here. And can you get away with that? No. Right? That is the answer he's trying to say. 31. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore sevenfold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Right? The thief may have to give up everything. Even if there's an excuse, even if the people can come up with an excuse, well, he's starving, he still has to restore sevenfold. He still has to give up everything. And even more so, the one committing adultery. See verse 32. Whoever commits adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He who does so destroys his own soul. See, this is the focus, right? It's not just about the physical. It's not just about what happens in this life. You're talking about your soul. You're talking about eternity. The one who commits adultery is an idiot, is what it says in verse 32, right? He's preying on his own life. You go back to verse 26, right? It says, an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. And he's saying the same thing here now. He destroys his own soul. Verse 33, wounds and dishonor he will get, and his reproach will not be wiped away. The wounds here is talking about physical wounds. He's going to get beat up by the husband when he returns. That's really what the point that he's trying to say. But then he also gets dishonor in the community. So physical wounds, but then you get this dishonor in the community, and a reproach will not be wiped away, does not go away. It's not a way to just ask for forgiveness and the reproach goes away. It stays. It's a dirt that doesn't wash. Verse 34, for jealousy is a husband's fury. Therefore, he will not spare in the day of vengeance, right? And the day of vengeance may not be physical, but it may be the authorities, is again the implication here. The day of vengeance may be when he brings them before the court, brings them before the community, and gets and he gets in trouble with the community because of what he's done. He will accept no recompense, nor will he be appeased though you give him many gifts. There's not a gift that can buy him off. There's not a gift that's going to buy the husband off if you have done this to his wife. All right, that was chapter 6. You don't think I can go this fast? All right, let's move forward. We'll bring some of this stuff together at the end. I want to make our way through. Chapter 7 again now is the introduction to another lesson on adultery. My son, keep my words, treasure my commands within you. Keep my commands and live, and my law is the apple of your eye. So again, we've talked about this again, but the words are his commands, the truth. He's saying, keep those and live. Keep those. They are the way that you want to live in this life. The law is the apple of your eye. He's saying, keep that as the focus, right? Keep that in your pupil. Keep focusing on those things. That is what's going to guard you. That is what's going to keep you and protect you. And go down to, where was I? Yeah, go all the way down. So here it says, keep my commands and live, right? In verse 20, in verse 2, if you go all the way to the end of chapter 7 to verse 27, it says, her house is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. So he's really laying out before them, do you want to live? Do you want to have a life that is valuable, or do you want to die? You want to have a life that is of no value? Do you want to have a life that just leads to death and leads to suffering? So he's really laying that out with what he has to say here in chapter 7. Again, in verse 3, bind them to your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart, right? Again, he's saying memorize them, get them deep within your head. Don't just hear these words and let them slide by. Bind them to your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Verse 4, say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your next of kin. He's really saying here, get married to wisdom. Remember, we've talked about this before, right? That Proverbs is trying to say that you really need to have an intimate relationship with wisdom. And he's saying the same thing here again in a different way. Say to wisdom, you are my sister. And the wording there is unfortunate. It really means you are my wife. You are my wife. You are my, call understanding your nearest kin. You are my closest kin as my wife. So he's saying, make wisdom your wife, and then you will not fall into someone else, right? Then someone else will not entice you if wisdom is your wife. Verse 5, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words, right? So if wisdom is your wife, if you have an intimate relationship with wisdom, you have an intimate relationship with these patterns, that's going to keep you from the immoral woman. That's going to keep you from the seductress and her words. If you have these words tied within your heart, memorized, bound to your fingers, written on the tablet of your heart. That's what he's trying to say. All right, so verse 6 then. So here in verse 6 and following, we have the father telling a story to the son. And it begins, for at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, I saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths a young man devoid of understanding. So he's saying, from my house, from my perspective, right? I'm in my house where I belong, and I'm looking down on the street where people don't belong. I'm where I am supposed to be, and I'm looking through the lattice down at the street. I see among the simple, I perceive among the youths a young man devoid of understanding, right? The simple, some of your translations may say the uncommitted. We've talked about this word before. It really is those that are not following the patterns of wisdom, right? So the simple, the ones uncommitted to wisdom, the ones who have not decided wisdom is the way that they should go, that they should follow. And again, just to connect all the dots here, when we talk about wisdom, we're talking about Christ, right? So those uncommitted to Christ, those not following Christ, that's the simple that he's talking about here. I saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths a young man devoid of understanding, a young man uncommitted, a young man unconnected to Christ. Verse 8, passing along the street near her corner, excuse me, he took the path to her house. So he's wandering aimlessly, right? He's passing along the corner near her corner. He's wandering in the street where he shouldn't be. If you remember, we talked about last time, don't get close to her door. Well, this guy is getting close to her door by wandering aimlessly. Doesn't have direction. He doesn't have the patterns. He doesn't have those things written in his heart such that he can't end up here. But he is ending up here because he does not have those things written on his heart. He doesn't realize that he was wandering right near her house. He's just wandering. He's just devoid of direction. And so you got to ask the question here is, what are we doing? Are we wandering through life without direction? And then occasionally sin jumps up and bites us because we're not paying attention, right? This is what this guy is doing. He's wandering through the street. He doesn't have the patterns. He doesn't have wisdom locked in his heart. And so he falls prey, as we will see. And so you got to ask the same question of us. Are we just wandering, or do you have clarity in the direction that you're moving forward in? Do you know what the next steps are? Do you know where you're going? Do you know what God wants for you? Or are you just wandering through? It's a dangerous thing to wander through. All right. I don't know where we are. Verse 8, that passing along the street near her corner, he took the path to her house. And again, the wording here is not intentional. Like he knew he was going to her house. He was just wandering. And he ended up on that path is really the implication of the original wording. Verse 9, in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night, right? So this is, again, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. He shouldn't be out there in the dark, in the night, in the twilight, in the evening. He shouldn't be wandering the streets. He shouldn't be aimlessly wandering around, and he is. And again, this is that warning to us. We should not be out wandering. We should not be wandering in the twilight, in the dark. That just means near sin, in places we shouldn't be, in evil. And he's doing that, and certainly he's going to be captured. It's also kind of a foreboding scene, right? You know, if this is a movie and all of a sudden it turns dark and you know the bad thing is about to happen. And it happens in verse 10. And there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. Some of the translations may actually say, behold, there a woman met him, right? It's this shocking thing where he's wandering the streets aimlessly, and then all of a sudden this woman grabs him. This woman is right in front of him. Obviously with this, it's the boldness of this woman to step out, with this dress of the attire of a harlot. It really shows her motives. It really shows what she's about, that she would step out boldly into the dark, into the street in front of this man. The father looking through the lattice down at this scene, it's very obvious to him because of her attire, because of her action, what she's about. But to the fool, to the one who's unprepared, to the one who's unaware, he's completely deceived by this disguise, if you will, by this action. He doesn't get it. He doesn't perceive it because he's not ready for it. And he's wandering aimlessly. And all of a sudden, this attire of the harlot with a crafty heart steps out. Verse 11 says more about her. She was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. Her body language gives her away, right? Not only her dress, but her boldness, her stepping out, her being loud and boisterous, and then her feet not at home. She's out in the street. She's not where she belongs. The man is at home, looking through the lattice. He is where he belongs. But the son is out in the street, and she is out in the street. So again, she is giving away who she is by her body language, by what she's doing, by her actions. Verse 12 says more about it. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. Again, she's where she should not be, outside, in the open square, where she should not be, lurking. Again, we see this this harlot, we see this adulteress who is looking for prey, right? Looking for someone that she can capture. And she finds this young man wandering aimlessly. She's lurking for him on every corner. And then verse 13, so she caught him and kissed him with the impudent face and said to him, I'll get to that, but the first thing is she caught him, right? She catches him. She reaches out and grabs him. Now this is, by the way, is not the tender love kiss, right? This is the forceful kiss on his face, that she grabs him, she catches him, and you just see this young man completely shocked and surprised, and this happens to him. And again, because he was not ready, he was not prepared, he did not have his heart prepared for something like this to happen. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time because he was stupid. Is that the right word? Yeah. Stupid. With an impudent face, she says to him, we'll talk about what he says in a minute, but she has this impudent face, this brazen face, if you will, and says these things to him. In verse 14, I have a peace offering with me. Today I have paid my vows. So I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. That's a weird set of verses there. So let me try to explain what's going on. So you have this woman comes out to him and says, I have peace offerings with me, and today I've paid my vows. She's saying to him, I have gone to the temple today, and I have sacrificed. And you remember the sacrifice, they would lay that on the altar, it would burn off the fat, and then when they would, some of the meat would be left for the priests, and some of the meat they would take home. So she has taken home some meat from the sacrifice, and the way that the rules were is you had to eat the meat that night, right? So she's saying to this young man, saying, listen, I've gone and made offerings today. I've gone and sacrificed to the priests, and now I've got this food, and it really needs to be eaten tonight. And so I've been looking, I've been diligently seeking someone to come and eat this food with me, such that I can fulfill my vows, and I'll be a very good and religious person by doing these wonderful things, right? I mean, what's so fascinating, she's trying to get her adultery here, to say it's okay because it's part of my duties, part of my religious duties, for you to come in. Now, in Canaanite religions, and we don't know who this lady is, but in Canaanite religion, there was often a connection between sex and sacrifice, right? So it's not very unlikely, not very unlikely. How about it's very likely that she could be saying, "Hey, I want you to come in and fulfill my religious vows by not only eating my meal but also having sex with me." Okay, so she's putting this whole thing in some kind of religious framework to try to get this guy to say, "Oh well, certainly I want to help you out here. I'll come help you eat this meal, and oh yeah, if you need sex, yeah, let's do that because I want to help you fulfill your religious the piety that you have here." I mean, it's this is the foolishness of the man, but it's also the craftiness of the woman to try to get him into her house, right? To use this kind of religious framework. Now, don't think that's not done today, right? Don't think that that this woman, that this crafty harlot today does not use some similar kinds of, this is going to be good for you. This is going to, this would be of great value to you in order to come into my house. It was certainly, God does not want you to be unhappy, right? God wants you to be happy. And so if you come into my house, you'll be happy. God wants you to be fulfilled, blah, 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 right? This false piety,
Right.
this false piety, that she's using here, is still used today, just use different words. There's, she's saying there's a really good reason for us to get intimate with one another. It's even a very spiritual reason. And people will use very similar ideas today to try to get you moving in this direction. Verse 15, so I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. Notice this, I came out to meet you, diligently to seek your face, and I found you. You are special, young man, right? I come out and picked you out of the whole crowd in order to fulfill my religious vows. You're the only one like you, the only one who can do that. You're amazing. You're incredible. You're fantastic. He's just feeding into his own vanity, right? Which, again, as we've talked about before, we've talked about the honey words before that the adulteress used. They're all connected to vanity and to the man's pride, and that's what she's feeding into here. It's you. I came out to meet you, to diligently seek your face. I have found you. Verse 16. I have spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. So now she moves from piety and moves from vanity into this beauty, this comfortable bed. Look how amazing it is. I've got these Egyptian linens. They're beautifully covered. I've got tapestry. It's great. It's comfortable. It's beautiful. Why in the world would you not come in? Oh, and by the way, verse 17, I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloe and cinnamon. It smells good too. I mean, she is using every wile that she has in order to entice them, right? First with this religious piety, and then vanity, and then the beauty of the surroundings, the smell of it, right? Verse 18, come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. Come. And the implication there is come now. Come right now. Let us take our fill of love. And this is the other thing, right? Put it in the picture of this is about love. There's nothing here about love, right? There's nothing here about love at all. It's all about lust. It's all about fulfilling their needs, not about love. But the word she used, let's take our fill of love this morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. The other thing is back in 16 and 17, where she talks about the tapestry and the Egyptian linen, and then the myrrh, the aloes and cinnamon. She's saying, listen, I have spent a lot of money just for you, right? I have prepared this bed and these smells and aromas just for you. I've really put down an investment, and you should take advantage of the money that I've spent in order to for us to do this thing. Let us delight ourselves with love. Verse 19, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will not come home on the appointed day. So listen, you're not going to get in trouble. My husband's not around. Don't worry, be happy. There's no fear, there's no danger, there's no penalty, there's no judgment. No one's going to find out. It reminds me of when Satan was talking to Eve. One of the things he says to her is, "You will not die." If you eat of this fruit, you'll not die. It'll be okay. She's not trying to convince him that it's right, but now she's just trying to convince him he can get away with it. Right? It'll be okay. A husband's not around. What's amazing is that this auto set off his moral indicator light, right? Wait a minute. You're married? You have a husband? Perhaps I should not do this, right? And she's using that as an argument as to why he should do it. But his moral indicator light does not go off. That this is just pure adultery. This is not love. This is not replacing your husband, because you're still saying your husband's going to be home in a couple of days, right? I mean, all of the arguments she's using just don't even logically make any sense. He's taken a bag of money with him, will not come home on the appointed day. In other words, she's saying with that, he's taken enough money so that he's going to be gone a couple of weeks. He's gone on a long journey. We're not going to be caught. It's going to be okay.
Rich?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, but, and I'm trying not to be holier than thou, but sometimes I sit here and go, we all have friends who've gone through this mess. And I sit here and go, how do you not let these things trigger you? I mean, how do you not see the obviousness of this, to stay away from it? I mean, I just shake my head when I have another friend that's gone or whatever. It's baffling to me.
Other thoughts in the room to answer CT's question?
Well, I think it comes down to the comment you made about wandering. You're not consciously thinking of what God has for you in your life, and you're just letting that in. And we can see by that, because I know where CT's head is right now. Mm-hmm. We sat next to people in Sunday school.
And I think, go ahead.
That logic isn't, or the arguments aren't logical. Well, by the time you get to this point, logic is not part of the equation anymore. Mm-hmm. If you haven't set your, Tim was saying, you haven't set your goals, you haven't set your purpose, you haven't memorized these patterns, these commandments. By the time you get there, you're too far gone.
When you look at this, it almost looks like, to me, it looks like a full assault. If you think about human senses, she's hit every one of his senses: visual, touch, hearing, feeling, everything. And
I think the thing that gets to me is that it's deception, right? To CT's point, it's not. These people are deceived. These people think they're okay, right? This guy thinks, well, I'm going to help this lady out in her need for her religious completion, right? And obviously she spent a lot of money on me, right? And, her husband's not home. Nobody's going to find out. It's going to be okay. It's going to be good for her. It's going to be good for me. Why in the world would I not do this? I mean, the brain does bizarre, deceitful things, right? As Satan works on us. We're all, just a couple of steps from stupid, as the pastor said before, and these people that that we all know who have fallen into this, they're not far from us in stupid, and so we got to be careful with our own. As CT said, right? You don't want to act self-righteous here, because any of us can fall into this if we allow those first steps, right? Those getting close to the door, not really understanding the patterns, and Yeah. Because the enticement is huge, and it's not, this one seems obvious, right? That the lady's standing in the doorway, blah, blah, but that's not how it happens. It's that lady at work. It's that who is a friend who comforts us when we're going through a tough time, right? Who helps us out, who goes an extra special mile, right? Blah, blah, blah. Who says, this is going to be good for you. You need a break. You're going through a tough time. All those things, all those enticing words. I don't want us to think this could never happen to me. It could, because we're stupid, just like the people, our friends who are stupid. So we have got to be alert, and we've got to be paying attention.
But a lot of times it's more subtle. I mean, this is, like Bob said, this is a downright assault.
Right.
Or just something as simple as, an inadvertent wink. Oh, she winked at me, and you carry that with you, and it's, so it's not, it can be very subtle.
Yeah.
It's, I'm thinking, okay, nobody knows, your husband's gone, but now, well, you got the guy looking through the lattice, he knows, but, it's a heavy burden that the person who participates in that carries. I mean, it's not like the devil lets you, okay, we're going to have this one night fling, and I helped her, she helped me, and we're done. That some of these people evidently carry a long time, and sometimes that's what breaks the camel's back. It comes out.
Yeah.
Well, I think Daniel, it's been a year or two, but he had a sermon that really spoke to this, I thought, where he talked about the battle in our minds that goes on and with sin. And he talked about how you have to create new pathways in your mind to walk on and spend time on and try to shut off the old pathways. And anyways, I'm not capturing it right, but it was really just the whole sermon was devoted to that battle we have in our minds. I thought that was a sermon.
That's good. Yep, excellent. And as I said, all these things begin in the imagination because of, as David said, we thought maybe she winked at me, right? And then all of a sudden, weird things started going on in your brain. So it all starts in the imagination before anything happens physically or words or anything else. All right, let's keep going. I appreciate that pause. Verse 21, with her enticing speech, she causes him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. Right? Her speech works. Her actions work, and she seduces him. She seduces, he comes under her power. He is not thinking logically anymore. In verse 22, immediately he went after her. As an ox goes to the slaughter, as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till an arrow struck his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know it would cost his life, right? Immediately, suddenly, impulsively, with no reflection, no pondering of the path, as we've talked about before, right? He goes after her. All of a sudden, he makes a quick, impulsive decision and goes after her. And then these amazing pictures, right? As an ox goes to the slaughter. And the second part of verse 22 is a translation nightmare. Mine says, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. What does yours say for the second part of verse 22? I'm just curious.
Like a deer bounding to a trap.
Yeah. See, what's interesting is that the translation of it, it's all over the place. And the one that says as a deer is in a trap or as a stag is in a trap is probably goes best with verse 23. which says till an arrow struck his liver, right? So it's an animal caught in a trap that gets hit with an arrow, right? So again, the picture is an ox going to the slaughter. He's going to the slaughter. He doesn't even realize he's going to the slaughter. This stag caught in a trap and is struggling to get out, but until the arrow comes and he's dead. And then a bird who is hastening and ends up in a snare. In all cases, these animals don't realize that they're walking into danger. They're walking into their own deaths. And that's the picture he's trying to say. This man goes after her just as these animals are walking into their own death. Because it ends at verse 23. He did not know it would cost his life. He did not know it would cost his life. Verse 24. Now, therefore, listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Now, we've seen this phrase before in verse 24, listen to me, my children. If you remember, you should think of children not horizontally, but vertically. So he's saying, listen to me, my descendants. Right? He's saying not just his son, but his son's son and his son's son's son. Listen to me, all my descendants. That's what that phrase means. This is something that you all are going to have to deal with. This is not just for my son, not just for the man, right? He's done with the story now and he's going back to his son. This is not just for that one who is in the street. All of you need to pay attention to the words of my mouth. Verse 25, do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray onto her paths. So you see again that picture of straying onto her paths, right? Turning to her ways. You're not paying attention to where you're going and you end up in the middle of her path. You're not locked into the path that you ought to be on and you end up on her path. You're not paying attention and all of a sudden you end up there. And again, don't let your heart turn aside to her ways. Don't, the seat of your decisions, the fundamental thing, don't let that get wrapped up with her enticements, with her words, with the things that she's trying to commit. Don't let that get to your heart. Once it gets to your heart, then you go back to verse 22 and immediately he went after her, right? Once your heart is not in the right place. Verse 26, for she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. See, this goes back to the comment that CT brings up, right? I mean, they were all strong men. They all had it together. They all thought they were good men. They all thought they were trying to live a good life. They were strong. But Satan is deceitful. And Satan deceived them because they thought they were strong men instead of realizing they were weak men, realizing they were stupid men, and that they needed to pay attention to what God was saying. They all thought this would never happen to me. Verse 27, her house is a way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. Her house is the doorway to hell, descending to the chambers of death. Now, someone may say, oh, wait a minute. Are you saying that adultery leads to hell? Does adultery lead to hell? There's a question to the group to see if I could get a response.
It leads to separation from God, and separation from God leads to hell.
Yeah, and I think that it's not so much that adultery leads to hell, but those who are going to hell go to adultery. Right, the two are connected together. Right, it is sin. It is separation from God, as Rick said. Now, is adultery the unpardonable sin? No, of course not. Right, it's not. It can be forgiven. It can be forgiven by God. As we've talked about before in here, right, when there is an adultery in a relationship, those relationships can be rebuilt, but it's only if God steps in and does something miraculous. And what I mean by that is, as I've said before, is two things have to happen. You got to have someone willing to forgive that adultery, which is only by God, because that's not something a human can do. And you got to have someone who has been broken by God to the point that they're completely broken in their heart over what they've done. And as we've said before, we've seen couples who that has happened, where the woman has forgiven, and that was only by the grace of God, and where the man was completely broken over what he did. And we've seen couples where there was bitterness and a lack of forgiveness on behalf of the woman, and where the husband never was sorry he got caught, but not broken over what he did to his wife. Right. So without those two things, there's not that relationship cannot be brought back together. But I just want to make the point is when we talk about, descending to the chambers of death, his house is a highway to hell. This is not the unforgivable sin. But
I look at it also as like a vacuum. A lot of the people that I know that have been through this, I'm not gonna say 99% of them, it wasn't a one-time thing where the guy walked in and said, oh, okay, we did this. This is, you get sucked into it. It worked this time. It did this time. I didn't get caught. And it keeps going and going and going. And most of the time they're in so deep, it's a train wreck.
Yeah, agree. All right, what I wanted to end this with is, so we just went through a chapter and a half. How about that? But what I wanted to end this with was, what have we learned from all this? And particularly what I wanted to ask you guys is, from what all we've read in begin in chapter 2, there was a lesson on adultery, and then chapters 5, 6, and 7. How do we keep ourselves from adultery? How do we keep ourselves from adultery? What have you learned?
Hey, Rick, I did a Bible study with some high school guys a few years ago. And the book was called Sin Will Ruin Your Life. And the color of the book was yellow. So it was like a warning to all young men. And every time we got together, all I had to enforce, sin will cause death to your life. Sin will ruin your life over and over and over. So it was like a warning to these young men. Kim and I did a hike a few years ago out in Acadia in Maine. And I wanted to do this hike. It's called Precipice. And I asked this guy coming down, hey, tell me about this hike. And he said, well, one wrong move and you'll die. And I'm like, all right, I'm out. I had a warning. Kim wanted to go ahead. I was scared, so I had to back out. I think to answer your question, we have to guard our hearts. We read in verse 23 and in 27 that you don't know that it's going to cost your life. So when you're in that situation, you don't know that it's going to cost your life. So you have to do things ahead of time. You have to guard your heart. You have to make sure you intentionally never allow yourself to be in those situations.
Good. Definitely. What else? What have we learned?
I think it's because we're all creatures of habit. I think it's where your head and your heart is on a daily basis. If you don't have a walk with the Lord, if you don't read the Bible, if you don't study it, if you don't apply it to your life, you're going to fall victim to all kinds of temptations in the world. And I just think it's where you keep your mind at is where you're going to be. And like Tim said, if you do that and you occupy your mind with the things of the Lord, then you're less likely to fall prey for these big things that come along because your head's not there. It doesn't mean you can't, it just means that you're better prepared.
So let me take both of those, and I want you to go back to chapter 2 for a minute. Flip back to chapter 2 and just remember this lesson, because it was a critically important lesson for us. So chapter 2, I'm just going to zip through a couple of verses here. If you remember, chapter 2, verse 1 says, my son, if you receive my words, then verse 3 says, if you cry out for discernment. Verse 4 says, if you seek her as silver, in other words, these commands, wisdom, you seek them as silver. Verse 5 says, then you'll understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Verse 9 says, then you will understand righteousness and justice. And then verse 16 says, to deliver you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth, etc., etc. So yeah, it goes, I think that, right, if you receive my words, if you cry out for discernment, if you seek her as silver, then you will understand what God wants and you will be delivered from evil and delivered from the immoral woman. I think that's a key thing, what you guys have pointed out there.
Rich, I think it's through, same method they can always use is through compromise.
Yeah.
You find yourself beginning to compromise, you're getting on that slippery slope, you know,
Yep.
and it happens, you know, you've heard the saying, sin always takes you farther than you wanted to go, costs you more than, you know, you wanted to pay, and keeps you longer than you wanted to stay. You know, and that's all through that depth of compromising with the.
Good. Look for a minute at chapter 5. I just want to remind you some things we've already learned. Chapter 5, verse 8. Right? Chapter 5, verse 8. Remove your way far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, right? Don't begin with compromise, right? Get far away. Good. What else?
So I would just still say that it amazes me the people who have fallen. I mean, the people that have been in these, I mean, church staff members, solid Christian believers, and just how it just scares me sometimes. You go, what the heck?
I think being scared is a good place to be, CT. No, I'm serious, right? I mean, again, recognizing that we're as stupid as they are. And if we don't do these things that we're talking about, we could end up in the same stupid place.
Rich, one thing I remember seeing there, one of the studies I was in, the guy was talking about how many is a study of pastors that had fallen to this. And it was they'd done the study, and they said that a lot of the reason, you know, there all kinds of reasons, but one of the things they focused on was that they had no support group. They were really isolated, and which is unusual. You don't think about that for a pastor, but and I'm not talking, you know, I'm talking about the study of pastors that have gone through. And so I think it's important too that you know, men and women have groups where you can realize that, you know, somebody's not alone in their struggles with this or whatever it is. And when you don't have that and you can't be real with each other, I think that's a danger, another danger we have, you know, as Christians if you don't have that.
I think that's superb, Hugh, and I think, you know, you got to ask the question, how open and honest are we with one another?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And that can't be a large group probably when you
right.
have trust that, you know, you're not throwing stuff out in social media or anything about other people, but.
Right.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
I might not be interpreting exactly right, but it seems like everything I read, they're always blaming a woman for initiating stuff. And the men are just as guilty as the women. But everything I read, it starts out with a woman in here.
Yeah, and this is obviously this is a book written to sons, as we talked about beginning. And as I said then, you know, we know today that the numbers, the statistics tell us that this is not a one-sided situation. That there are as many women as men and men as women who fall into this problem. So Yeah, we have to understand that as we read through this.
So this is where the mom told the dad, you need to have that talk with your son. So, but, we're talking physical, yeah. Like physically, a man and a woman get together here, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's when you're on the internet and you're searching, it's like, oh, or you walk by the magazine stand when you go to get a book and just look over this, like, yeah, I mean, it's not just, there are paths all over the place. And you just got to stay on that straight and narrow and not waver. I mean, it's just, to me, this is like worst case scenario. It causes a break between you and your mate. But there's other things out there just as tempting and available that, yeah.
Well, David, that takes us right back to Matthew, right? Right, where Jesus says it's not just about physical adultery, it's about adultery in your heart. What are your eyes looking at? What is your heart looking at? Right? Absolutely. When we talk about adultery, it's not just the physical acts, it's where your heart is, where your tension is. Good. The only other one that you guys haven't mentioned, I just want to make sure you remember, is in chapter 5, verse 15 and following, right? Which begins with drink water from your own cistern, right? Make sure you have the right relationship with your wife, with your husband, is also important in order to keep from wandering and straying. And then the final one I would just remind you of is, right, ponder the path of your feet, right? Pay attention, dagnabbit, to what you're doing, and to as David says, the things you're looking at, the things you're watching, the things your eyes are on, where your attention is, what's going on in your brain, as Hugh is talking about, the stuff that's in your heart, what's going on there. Ponder the path of your feet. I think, to me, that's the overwhelming sentiment here about trying to keep us from this. All right, anything else before we go to prayer time?
Just a quick example. We had 4 of the grandkids for a week last week, and a commercial came on. And all of a sudden, all 4 of the kids, from 12 to 4, put their hands over their face. Inappropriate. What? Was an underwear commercial where they end up with the guy and girl standing at a bar with cowboy hats on, and they've got their underwear on. I'm thinking, what? But already they're seeing, it's right there. And it's like, yeah, well, that commercial will be off in 20 seconds. It's hands up, inappropriate. It struck me that even at that age, to be taught what's right, what's wrong, it didn't just pass that, well, it's okay.
Yeah, one quick comment, if you don't mind. At the very beginning of Proverbs, in chapter 1, verse 2, it starts off with to know wisdom and instruction. And that word that invented to know it says no wisdom and instruction. That word instruction is what was in correction of the stocks. So there's a lot of relationship here. And as far as like the question about the man, if we go back to Adam and Eve, Satan used the vector of the woman to get to the man. I think it's not so much that he's trying to make it man versus woman, but since he's talking to the son, since he's talking to a man, he's showing us that Satan wants to use the woman to get to the man. And we have to be very careful. Even with Abraham, what was Abraham's first fall? He listened to his wife, Sarah, and he fathered a child through Hagar, which was not in accordance to God's will. So I don't really think it's so much man versus woman as us being given the instruction on how Satan works and how we have to be very careful about that.
Yeah, Satan works through relationships.
Yep.
Right? And so we got to be careful about those relationships, regardless of the sex.
Yep.
Good. All right, let's move to prayer time. Joe, anything here?
Stop the recording.
Stop the recording.
Go.